Hey folks, this Game Master Diary is all about narrative fatigue. So first of all, what do I mean by narrative fatigue? This refers to when the table, whether it's the game master, players, or everyone, starts to tire of the story. And when people start to tire of the story, it can sometimes lead to the campaign just kind of petering out. And especially if you're the game master and you're getting tired of the story, you're not going to want to run it, so it's not going to be a fun experience. So here are some ways to kind of help battle that narrative fatigue so it's still fun. You get to finish out the campaign that you wanted to run and everyone's having a good time. And I think there are a number of things that cause narrative fatigue, so this video I'll be addressing those. The first thing is motivation. If your players, if their characters don't feel motivated to be continuing on with the story, you're gonna run into some people that just get tired and they don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it. So a couple different ways to deal with this. First is if your players are a bit confused on what their characters are supposed to be doing. And if you think about this, for the character, it can be as short as like a split second between the end of a session and the beginning of the next session. But for the players, oftentimes it's a week or more, depending on how frequently you meet. So it can be easy to kind of lose sight of like a long-term motivation for why you're on this quest. So if that's the case, as a game master, it might be good to just kind of check in with your players, make sure that they remember why they're supposed to be doing what they're doing, and either out of session or in session, providing that reminder. So out of session just being like, hey, yeah, you're trying to do this. Or in session, maybe an NPC or some motivation comes up that just reminds them. And the in session kind of moves into the other side of it, which is if the characters aren't feeling motivated. So this is something that maybe you work a little bit with the player, maybe you draw in some backstory, maybe you talk to some other players, especially if it's just one character that's feeling unmotivated, to help motivate that character. We've kind of talked about this before in a video. But that can kind of help remind the player and remind the character why they're doing this, why they care about the story, why they care about completing this campaign. The second thing is adding in milestones. So these little story arcs that all lead up to the big, long campaign story arc. A great example of this is in the first season of Critical Role. Not really spoilers. They are as part of the bigger quest, they are trying to find these vestiges, these different artifacts. That's a really good way of adding in these milestones where the characters have a clear goal. Okay, we want to get this artifact next. And then once they get it, it's that like, ooh, yes, we're making progress, we're moving along. Whereas if you have a long running campaign that doesn't really have any milestones, it's just we're constantly chasing after this bad guy, or we're constantly trying to find information and never really getting enough of a accomplishment to feel like you're really doing anything, that can get frustrating. That can get very tedious and lead to some of that narrative fatigue because the players don't get a good sense of where things are going. Also, adding in these milestones helps with shining the spotlight on different players. So that can help because if you have one player that's very extroverted or is very vocal, they might be in the spotlight all the time, but that can get tiring, and it can also be tiring for the other players if they don't get their chance to shine. So having milestones, especially kind of inspired by characters' backstories or geared towards maybe one character gets to take the lead. You're going on a big arcane quest, so the wizard gets to take the lead, or you're going into the Underdark, and hey, that's the ranger's favored terrain. They might get to kind of take the leadership role or take the spotlight, and so you are helping to balance the attention at the table so that it's not always on one person. The third thing you can do within the campaign is include side quests. Whether these are at the end of a milestone or in a nice lull, the group gets to a new town and they're stocking up and hey, there's a notice board, or they hear about an interesting artifact that maybe doesn't have to do with the big story, but is a cool thing, or they can get gold or something like that that will help them but isn't necessarily tied into the main story. The other thing with this is this helps to make your world feel real, that not everything is involved in the major story plot, but that there are all these other little plots, little stories. The random farmer in village A that's like 200 miles away from where the big castle is may not care so much about, you're trying to overthrow that person. He's more focused on, why have my livestock disappeared? Or why are the woods alive? Or the party hears about a cool artifact. Whatever that side quest is, it provides, again, that kind of like, ooh, cool, in a couple sessions we completed something, we accomplished something. So it provides that motivation. It provides a little tiny respite from the main story, so maybe you can have some fun, different character interactions, and then jump back into that main story. Now, if you kind of just need a break from the main story, and this is especially if you as the game master are feeling a bit of narrative fatigue, you might suggest doing a one-shot. So instead of like saying, hey, we're going to take a break from the campaign for a while, and, lose that routine of everybody gets to show up once a week or every other week, month, whatever your schedule is, saying, hey, I would like to run a one shot, or this is a great opportunity if somebody else at the table wants to try game mastering, or you want to try and encourage someone else to try game mastering. That's maybe a whole other video. That's a great opportunity for somebody else to run something, whether it's in that same system, or maybe you try out a different system, or maybe you pick a game that's specifically geared for one-shots, like a lot of Grant Howitt's one-page RPGs, A Quiet Year, something like that. It provides you a break from this story, and maybe you as a game master might get a cool idea from running this one shot, or somebody else running this one shot that you can bring into your story. That's something I think as a game master it's important to take some breaks from time to time from your world, especially if it's a homebrew, to get inspiration from other things, to kind of give your brain a break from being so concentrated on it. I know I personally find I get a lot of ideas just kind of, refilling that creativity well. And then you can jump back in. And that's one thing that I think can be the reason that long-running campaigns can start to feel tedious or people lose interest in them, is if you look at a lot of how we consume media, it's in kind of bursts, especially now with like streaming and binge watching seasons. You're not waiting like years and years to finish out a season. But that's how we tell the stories in campaigns, in tabletop role playings, which is nice because you do get to slow down and really dig into character moments, stuff like that, if that's what you want to be doing. But it also can sometimes lead to these moments where you're like, I've been playing this story for 3 years and we're still not done. So having these things of making sure that the players and characters have motivation, making sure, and working with them, it's not all on the game master, it's also partially on the players. Making sure that you have these milestones or moments where you can kind of have these little story arcs to part of the big story. And then if you need to, throw in a side quest or do a one shot, take a break from that big story, even if it's not doing the one shot and playing whole different characters, but providing a chance for your characters to explore maybe a different story. All right, so have you run into narrative fatigue at your table? Has it caused a campaign to fizzle out, or were you able to come up with a solution? I'd love to continue the conversation down in comments below. Thanks to all our patrons, especially Jonathan. If you like what we do and want to support our channel, head on over to our Patreon page. There you can get access to patron perks and exclusive streaming events. And you can join in on our community discussions. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you give it a like, share it with somebody, and don't forget to subscribe because we make videos here every week all about tabletop RPGs and our other geeky interests. All right, I'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye! We got new audio equipment. Thank you, patrons! I couldn't disappear.